So first I should say thank you to Matt and Lara, the rest of the Quorum team for organising this and giving me the opportunity to address you. And thank you while you're still awake, I'd like to say that. So thanks for coming and listening and so on. I guess the first question I have for you is, what do we think about the title? Is that a bit grandiose? Do you like the song? Do you know of it? You like it? I mean, actually, Matt had on his template, it said tonight, ... And I thought, look, it's got to follow. But the more I thought about it, I thought, look, actually, this embodies the spirit of Quorum, right? Because we're all entrepreneurs, we're all here trying to make things happen, do deals. And in our core, we all believe that the next conversation, the next meeting, the next deal is going to take us that one step further to our goal. So with that spirit in mind, I would like to take you on a little journey and talk about co-living. I'll talk a little bit about my past, not too much, because quite frankly, I'm much more excited about the future. And we'll explore co-living where it is today, you know, our iteration as Respublica of it, and what we're trying to do. So thank you. So it started outside of property in terms of my career. I studied law, and then somehow I was just about to go into that nice, shiny corporate office, and my brother pulled me away and said, I've got this great trading business and it's going really well. And it wasn't exactly this, but it wasn't far removed. It was just slightly bigger scale containers of consumer goods, but we started doing that, took it from you know, just literally us on a phone to where we got to about 70 million in revenue and exited in 2015. I could probably do a talk on that, but I won't. So, but that was good. But kind of meanwhile doing that, we sort of purchased a house. It was a new build, and we were one of the first ones on there. So we got to see the whole development come up around us. And as you do, when you're naive and a layman, you look at this and you think, all right, so you get an architect, you know, pay him a bit of money, get some planning, go and build it. How hard is this really, right? Let's go make some millions. So obviously found to my cost that it wasn't that easy, but nevertheless, we built some really great stuff. This was alongside our sort of main business at the time, so we just did it programmatically, a couple of developments at a time, but we got to about 63 million in sales, did 9 developments, full value chain from sort of acquiring land, planning, building and selling. And we actually managed the building in-house, which I'll never do again, but that was pretty tough. And 2008 came and went. We were relatively unscathed because it was still sort of good locations. And I think as this market matures, the one thing I'm really conscious about is still finding places where there's scarcity, because when there's scarcity of product, you can ride that cycle. But so just one little thing there. These are some more of some of the things we built. Again, won't spend too much time on that. But what I'm really excited about is the future and Respublica and what we're trying to do now, which is to revolutionize the living experience for urban renters. And it just sort of strikes me, or sorry, one step back. On Elysian Homes, we sort of, once we sold our business, we said, you know, what do we do for the next couple of decades? And we knew we wanted it to be real estate, but it had to be exciting, it had to be inspiring, and it had to actually fit the context. And the context we saw around us was actually the living experience is pretty brutal, especially for young professionals. It's just not a fun experience. There's not a lot of wow moments, but there's lots of pains. So we just said to ourselves, look, is there a possibility through some typology or other to create an experience which actually delivers on wow, is sensibly priced? How do we go about doing that? And that was, I guess, the starting position. And now we have the confidence to say, right, we're going to change things up. As with everything, team, of course, is absolutely vital and key. I won't go through everyone, but just to say I'm lucky enough to be working with my brother, who I've never known anything else, so can't get rid of him. But that's good. We've got some sort of fairly different skill sets, so that works. Pick out a couple of other people. Paul was a head of boutique operations at Intercontinental Hotels. So he had managed a portfolio of 25 hotels. I think launched 6 hotels from scratch to sort of getting them built and fully running. So absolutely lives and breathes hospitality. I'll mention maybe a couple of our non-exec directors. Stuart was chairman of planning at CBRE for a decade, now advisor to TfL on placemaking. So good sort of relationships with GLA, etc. Trevor was managing director of Barratt Southern, so built about 1,000 homes a year for the last decade. And John, I should probably make special mention of, who was our first non-exec director and is also an investor in the company. he founded the Brandau Group, which were one of the first student accommodation providers, and they sold their portfolio for 1.1 billion to the Canadian Pension Plan. And now I kind of think it's always a good idea that if you go into any business, find someone who sold it for $1 billion and try and get them on your board. So I think that's just my rule for going forward. But no, John's been great. So that's the team. And I think it's always useful to start with the question why before you're going to do anything. So why co-living, but also broadly, more broadly, why innovative styles of housing? What's wrong with what we've got now? And there's lots of reasons that feed into this, but I think I'll try and focus on three key ones. And the first one I think we're all really, really familiar with is that nothing's affordable. But it's actually, when you look at the scale of the issue, it's just crazy, mind-boggling. PwC came up with a report recently that said, on average, first-time buyer would take 20 years to save for a deposit. And when you look at London, 60% of renters are under the age of 35. And most of them are single. So when you are with the planning authority and they say you've got to build 60% of your build-to-rent scheme, 2-bed and over, it's a question. It's a question. You know, does that make sense? Private rentals, yeah, I mean, all of us probably today, when we walk out of here, are going to press a button, a car's going to turn up, we're going to get in, it's going to take us home, we're not even going to have to reach into our pocket. What a magical experience that is. And yet we think, you know, it's a status quo that in the property world, you're getting charged fees for reference checks. You know, it's taking 2 months to get your plumbing sorted out. And you know, it's just a terrible experience. So the actual status quo needs to be challenged. I guess the other thing I'd say is loneliness is a massive thing. But and I think we have a part to play as developers. When you think about, you know, building these 100 apartments on top of a Tesco where no one ever talks to each other, are we surprised there's like, you know, there's increased densification of urban areas that people are feeling bloody lonely and they're not enjoying the experience? You know, we've got a role to play in actually alleviating that. I guess the other thing I'd say is just generally about the sharing economy and space as a service. I think things have changed, priorities have changed. People want service, they want experience. Do they really care about exclusive use? Is luxury a thing that people crave now, or is it authenticity? So I think there's just been a big shift in terms of people's priorities. And if we look at someone like WeWork, who's now the biggest commercial tenant in London, you know, what are they selling? They're not really selling a desk space. They're selling a brand, they're selling an experience. And I think there's just lots to be learned from them in terms of how we actually take our developments forward as well. So a couple of reasons for why. And then I thought I'd just talk a little bit about what. I don't know whose kids they are, but the reason I used them in the picture was I thought, okay, it's kind of symbolic that this typology is very embryonic, right? We're right at the cusp and beginning of this. And so when people often ask, well, what is co-living? You know, it's not fixed. We can actually input into this, and this is a massive opportunity for people to get involved and actually create this typology, because there are different iterations of it, but by no means is it a fixed thing. I think for me, probably 3 things are core, if we're calling it co-living. One is that there should be community and shared spaces, because otherwise we're just talking about smaller spaces, which is probably micro-living, but that's fine, but probably wouldn't be co-living. The other is once you have those kind of large shared spaces, it requires management, so there's a strong service element. And then there's the optimization. Why? Again, what are we delivering that is better than status quo? So, you know, where is the optimization coming in from this sharing of space? Everything else actually is up for grabs. You know, there are iterations of short stay. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Zoku in Amsterdam, student hotel. They're kind of doing co-living on a more transient population. You've got long stay, the likes of Ollie and the Collective and people like that. You've got people doing really large-scale projects. I think Harbour in Shanghai just raised 1.6 billion for their co-living fund, so they're obviously not going to be doing small schemes. They're going to be massive. But then you've got people like Node who are doing like 20, 30 units. So everything's to play for. I think in terms of demographic, people are looking at the low-hanging fruit and saying, right, let's look at millennials and how do we address this? But there's no reason why it can't work for the elderly. It can't work for families. There's some great examples actually in Denmark of co-housing working really well with families. So it's all to play for. And I guess the other thing is, I think in planning terms, people get very hung up on the use class and the terminology, but really, does it matter? The use class order, and it'll be interesting to see what David thinks, but I think it's just completely outdated. It's got no relevance today. You know, space is changing completely. The way we work is changing. That's leading to massive changes in how office space is done. No one's shopping anymore in shops, so that space is all going to change. You know, so I think, again, our duty is to focus on how do we deliver an amazing user experience, how do we create really thriving communities, and the rest is, battling the planning system to make it happen. But with all that enthusiasm and all of that sort of goodwill and the entrepreneur in you that just says, like, let's just smash it and we've got to fight these battles, a word of caution, we're experiencing, everyone in the sort of co-living sector, quite an amount of pushback. And it's just normal, right? It's hard enough, the planning journey, when you're doing exactly what they want you to do, let alone coming and trying to sell them something which they think is like those two kids sitting in the box. So, it's a tough journey. All I'd say is if you're coming into co-living space, just be aware. In policy terms, there is a big part on shared living, which is policy H18 in the London plan, and you can have a look at that. But again, even that's brand new. So I think it's our job to push, it's our job to fight. We've got to try and bring them on the journey with us. It's really a big education piece. We've got to be creative, play at the margins of planning. You just have to. Is it C3? Is it C1? Is it sui generis? You've got to make it work somehow. And if you can, have a plan B. In terms of the opportunity, all that said, I still 100% feel it's worth doing it, and the time is now, because the opportunity is immense. And just trying to sort of put it in perspective in terms of the wider market, we've got PRS, your standard PRS buy-to-let, which is worth 1.3 trillion. A small part of that is now, and there's a big shift happening, but build-to-rent, so purpose build-to-rent. I think there's about 50 billion of capital already committed to sites at this current time, and it's only going to grow. So it's going to become definitely an institutionalized asset class. Smaller than that, student, but if we look at what happened to student over the last 10 years, it's just gone nuts, right? It's 25 billion asset class. I think about 4 billion was traded in 2016 alone. And this is just of 1.7 million full-time students who are paying more than they otherwise would have been paying in accommodation. It's grown from like 1,800 to 27,000 rooms in London, private rooms. So if you look at the scale of how that matured and actually transpose that onto what co-living could be, there's absolutely no doubt that this could be well in excess of a 50 billion asset class in the UK alone, over the next decade. So everything to play for. I guess just a word on what the feedback we're getting from institutional investors is. For them, it's just different buckets of income coming from beds as they see it. And I think in terms of just numbers, a word on maybe yields. People are paying 3.5%, I think, for build to rent in prime London. Probably 4.5% for student. Where does co-living sit? Maybe there's a slight, premium that the investor gets for that uncertainty. So maybe it sits around 5%. But as we saw with student, the yield has compressed massively over the last decade, right? So I think it was at 6-7. It's now down at 4.5%. So getting into this asset class now means you also benefit from that arbitrage on that yield. So how do we approach it? What's our thought process about co-living? We start very much with the customer in mind. Who is our member? And we've tried to think a little bit more about the psychographic rather than demographic. So rather than this age, this they live here and this is what they do, it's more about, look, what are the jobs that this group of people is trying to get done? And I mean jobs in the broader sense of the word. So okay, they need space for storage and space to eat, but they also, what are some of the higher elements on that sort of hierarchy of needs that we can try and tick off? What's their desire for belonging? What's all these types of things that we can wrap into our product. And then we just think about, right, so what are all our customer pain points and how do we solve them? How do we turn them all into gains? And out of that, we craft a member experience. So that's the journey we've been on. And it's sort of focused us around these 4 quadrants. And for each one of those, we're just working very, very hard to craft our experience. So on the studio, it has to be comfortable. There has to be there still has to be enough space. You need a great bed, you need a great shower, etc. On the convenience side, how do we make it completely seamless? How do we give the Uber experience where you just turn up with your luggage, there's no paperwork to sign, there's no deposit to pay, and it's just done? You know, how do we deliver actually moments of delight? You know, hotels do so much work to actually capture people and give them little moments of joy when you're there for like 24 hours. We've got people living with us, in our places for a year. It's an incredible opportunity to develop really strong relationships with your members or tenants, whatever you want to call them. Great social spaces. So what are the kind of spaces people need? People need space, I think, today to work, whether you have a full-time job or whatever, it's a given. So they get co-working spaces. You need space to work out. You want leisure spaces. So really creating a mix of those. And then community is right in the core of everything we do. So whether it's the program of events that we put on, or it's the sort of more the digital of how we connect all the members in the building, community is absolutely at the core of what we think about. And a lot of that is powered by technology, but I won't sort of go on about that. So all of that then comes together to really give us what is the brand experience, what is the Respublica brand experience, and that's what we're really trying to deliver. And so for us, again, it's about a few things. It's about an unparalleled member experience. It's about having a super convenient user journey at every point in your stay. So whether it's the onboarding process and the fact that you get given a beer or a cup of coffee when you arrive, and you get shown around, and you get given a welcome box, whatever it might be, to make sure that member experience is amazing. Our buildings should be crafted for the location. We don't want to do cookie cutter. We want to tell the story of the location, and we want to be true to it, and sort of really add to the communities that we're building in. Unscripted moments of joy, little things. We're going to collect so much data on our members, and just knowing that, Gaurav, goes to the gym every day, and by 6 a.m. he's done. Why not one day just have a latte waiting for him? It's little things that just will create authentic relationships with our members, and mean that people want to stay with us, and we'll get longevity of tenure. And the other thing is really about belonging to the location, create community within the building, but actually how do we reach out and invite people into our buildings? So I'll talk through some of that on our Campbell scheme. Brings me on to Campbell. So that's one of our first sites at scale. Campbell is a phenomenal area. It's got really great, vibrant art scene, and it's a real leisure destination. It's between Peckham and Brixton, one of those sort of lost parts. But, now I think with those other areas becoming so expensive, lots and lots of people are moving there, and it's got a real buzz about it. So we're like a 5-minute walk from Denmark Hill Station, which takes you into Victoria and King's Cross within about sort of 10 minutes. And we've got 3,000 square meters of employment use on the ground floor, which is completely public space. I'll go into what that is. 290 co-living units. And total is about 13,000 square meters. And what we're creating on the ground floor is a new urban village, pretty much, as we like to think of it. So it's a real mix of uses. We've got the sort of oval shape there is 2 floors of co-working. As you come in, you enter through a double height space, which is 8 meters wide. You've got art sculptures, landscaping, seating. On the left, you've got fitness studio and gym. And as you sort of go towards the middle of the building, we've got a sort of cafe, gallery space, art studios around the outside of the building, and then restaurants and so on. And what we're trying to do is really co-create value with the best brands in their class. So it is about all adding value to each other and really creating a sense of place. Sort of mock-up of one of our studios. And our plan, essentially, or our vision for 2027 is to have 71 assets under management, roughly just below 20,000 rooms, have created 2 billion of assets, and to really be the brand leader in our space. And it's very ambitious, but it is doable. And it starts with, this year, 2 sites in the planning process, which we have. Next year, 3, then 4. Probably once we're 3 years in, starting to take management contracts as well, because we would have proved kind of the experience we deliver. So, yeah, it's massively optimistic, really ambitious, but you only live once, right? So give it a go. And that just brings me on to probably just closing and saying, we are all about quorum, belonging, membership. How do we help each other? How do we collaborate? If you feel after seeing this, that there are opportunities that you could add value to us or that we can add value to you, please reach out. Really, really happy to explore all opportunities. We're looking for sites. We're looking for underperforming assets that we can reposition. We are open to doing JVs, leasehold arrangements, management contracts. We're here to do business. So, get in touch. And we'll also be raising funding. So if you want to come along on that journey, really, there's opportunities to do that as well in the future. So I guess that is it. Thank you very much.